Hey, it's Chuck Armstrong with Loudwire Nights, and this is Loudwire Nights On Demand. I'm still in a bit of shock that we had Tony Iommi on the show celebrating all things Black Sabbath. This first aired on Friday, May 31st. Enjoy it. I know you will. I really don't even know where to begin by way of introduction for tonight's special guest, because how do you properly introduce a living legend, a guy who has had his hands on some of the most iconic songs and guitar riffs of all time, a guy whose legacy and influence still lives on today, and a guy who, for me personally, is the reason why I went out and bought a Gibson SG as soon as I could afford it. I am beyond humbled to welcome Tony Iommi to the show tonight. Tony, thank you so much for being here, man.
Oh, thanks, Chuck. Well, what do I say to that? Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Tony, I really have about 10,000 questions for you. And so I know we'll only be skimming the surface tonight. But, right now, tonight, we're celebrating the release of a brand new massive Black Sabbath box set. It's called Anno Domini 1989 to 1995, and it features 4 albums from the Tony Martin era of Sabbath. And this is the first time these records have been reissued. And here we are, 35 years after that first album, 1989's Headless Cross came out. You were the only original Sabbath member on all 4 of these albums. So I'm curious, as we celebrate the release of this, how are you feeling now, man? Now that the box set is complete, these reissues are complete, they're ready for the world and fans to hear. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm really glad, because over the years, I've always been asked about this. Will we ever see the Tony Martin stuff? And I think it's great for the people who know Tony Martin and know he was with us. It's also great for people who don't know about Tony Martin, who have been younger and come along, joined seeing these box sets at the moment, So I think that's really good. So I'm feeling good about it. And finally, we got a chance to release this stuff,
Yeah, well, I guess you've been open about wanting to reissue these albums at some point over the years. So, why was the time right to get this out now?
Well, we've gone through a series from all the Aussie stuff, a box set, and then we've done the Dio. And so, it's time for the Tony Martin stuff now. I mean, he was with us for about 10 years or so. So it's about time it sort of came out. And I think it's great that it finally has been able to come out. And also, I wanted to remix Forbidden, because I wasn't happy with that. And neither was Cozy Powell. Well, none of us were really that happy with the sound of it or anything on that. And I really wanted to get hold of the tapes and be able to remix that. But everything has to come in stages, So since we had all the other box sets out, you have to take its time until now. Really, it's only taken 30. It's only taken 30 odd years. What do you mean?
That's right, man. That's right. Do you enjoy going back? I mean, you listed these other box sets or reissues. Do you enjoy going back and revisiting these things and kind of giving them fresh life?
It's been really interesting, to tell you the truth, Chuck. Certainly on this album, to be able to listen back to, because this period got sort of a bit lost, within the Sabbath thing, because obviously we had Ozzy, and then we had Dio, who were both named people. And then when we had Ian Gillan, and then we had Tony Martin, who a lot of people just didn't know. So we had to really try and break that band. And so it's been great to be able to go back and listen to a lot of these tracks that we did at that time. And yeah, it's been interesting.
You mentioned Forbidden, and I think that's one of the best things about this box set is the fact that we do get this fresh, remixed version of Forbidden. To me, it's such a legendary album for a few reasons. I mean, the fact it was produced by Ernie C. of Body Count, featured the opening track with Ice-T, but also the fact that this was Sabbath's last album for almost 20 years. Until the original guys got back together in 2013, to release 13 in 2013. But it sounds like it was really important to you and something you've been wanting to do to actually remix this and get the version out that you guys wanted.
Well, it is, because, with all respect to Ernie C. and Ice-T was a lovely guy, Ernie C., lovely people. But it's the first time, for me, I've not been involved with the production, and it was really difficult, because it was a thing from the record company that wanted to bring some fresh blood into the fold, and Ice-T was going to be singing on the track, but we didn't know about Ernie C. And then when the record company said we'd like Ernie C to produce it, bring a different look to the music and to the sound and everything. But of course, so we went with that. But we weren't really happy because we didn't know really what Ernie C was like, even though a lovely guy. But as far as his work, we didn't know much about it. And it became very difficult because we got Cozy Pell there. And when we were in the studio and Ernie C's trying to tell him to play something different, to play a different style of drumming. Well, Cozy Pell's an iconic drummer.
Yeah.
And to tell somebody to play something of a different style, it just didn't go down well. And Cozy was not happy at all. And, none of us were. I mean, it's very hard to be told to, it's like somebody saying to me, can you play all the, widdly diddly stuff? I can't. That's not my style of playing.
Yeah.
So it did become a bit of a problem. And as I say, they were lovely people, but it was hard to be able to leave it in somebody else's hands, which we did. And so, of course, when we heard the sound of it, because Ernie C brought their engineering as well, it weren't the sound we were looking for. So I thought, well, and everybody had gone on about it for years. And of course, sadly, Cozy Pell's not here now, but it would have been full of joy if he knew that we could remix it again. So what we tried to do it's difficult again because everything's there on tape. You can only do so much with it to bring in certain sounds because you can't obviously play it again. You've got to do what you've got there. So pulling the tapes apart, we found a couple of harmonies that Tony had done and weren't on the tracks, and some guitar bits that weren't there. And so we brought them in and used what we could really and try and enhance the sound to more like we were expecting. I say you can only do so much, and so hopefully, it's better.
Well, and you had mentioned it, but yeah, Cozy passed away just a few years after Forbidden came out, and so
yes,
even beyond the sort of just personally wanting to get the album to sound closer to the way you wanted to, it's got to have a pretty deep meaning for you to be able to do this almost in honor of Cozy.
Well, it really was, because Cozy is a very, very dear friend and has been since 69, 68. So we've known each other a long time, and to be able to get the chance to work together was really a great honor for me. I loved working with him. He loved working with me. And so when we had the band around us with Tony Martin and Neil Murray, we had I thought, a good lineup, And but at the time, it was hard to break through with what we got, and also certainly in the States, because IRS Records, and no disrespect to them, but they weren't. The distribution of the album and letting people know we got an album in the cities we were playing, it was non-existent. I mean, a lot of people just didn't know we were even playing in these towns, So it's very, very hard at that time.
Tony, as we talk about this lineup, and you mentioned Ozzy and Dio, of course, and Ian. I'm sure you've thought about this many times, and I'm sure you've been asked about this in some way or another, a lot over the decades. But this is such an interesting release to me because it does put a spotlight on an era of Sabbath that generally doesn't get much attention with Tony Martin as a singer, and yet. What some fans may not realize is behind Ozzy, he was the second longest serving singer for Sabbath. But with you as the only original member, it could have been very easy to take on a different name for this decade with Tony. It could have also signaled the end for Sabbath, because there aren't many bands that come to mind that not only survive frontman changes and other lineup changes, but actually thrive and solidifies their status over the years as one of the most important bands of all time. And so I'm curious, Tony, and I know this is a loaded question or a very deep philosophical question perhaps, but what do you think it is about Sabbath to you that gives it that power to endure, and not just endure, but to thrive in the midst of such, significant changes and even turmoil?
Well, to me, it's been my life, really. I mean, since we started, and I just believe in what we did and how we did it, and I've just kept on with that same belief of, I haven't left the band, so I just carry on. And people, and it's strange with Sabbath because we've had original members coming in and out over the years. You know, Ozzy's been in and then out and then in, and then Dio in, out, in, Tony Martin in, out. So
Yeah.
it's really peculiar. And then same with Bill. Bill's been in, Geezer's been in, then they've been out, and then once it's just ironic how things have happened. But it happened, and finally, of course, we got together with the 13th album. Unfortunately, Bill wasn't on that, and we'd have liked him to be, but it just wasn't right. But it's just always been that thing with Sabbath. You can never say they're never going to be with us again because it's never worked out that way. If you can never write anything or anybody off, and I've never done that.
So, I mean, Tony, yeah, like for you to say that Sabbath has always been your life, I mean, clearly you have always been Sabbath as well. You know, that's the sort of the common thread throughout the decades that has kept Sabbath here and that has kept Sabbath, top of mind when we talk about incredible rock bands, metal bands, whatever you want to say, that still influence people today. I mean, Tony, it's, there's no Sabbath without Tony.
I hope not. No, it's just that belief I've had of staying, not being able. Many times it's a bit easy to say, well, right, I've had enough now, I'm off. But I've never been able to feel that way. I just can't let things go like that. I have to believe in it and go and see it through, and try my best to see it through. And, I've been in a good position. It's paid off. And of course, eventually then we got the original lineup back. And then later on, we done the 13 album without Bill, of course, but at least we did get the original lineup back at one point before that.
I'm curious, as you've obviously been front of this reissue, this Anno Domini box set of these Tony Martin era Sabbath records, but as you worked on these over the years, were you talking to some of the guys who are still around from that time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Geezer's been involved. I mean, Geezer played on on one of the albums
on
well.
Tear, right? Yeah.
Well, no, on Tear. No, he played on Cross Purposes.
That's right.
Yeah. We had Neil Murray on Tear.
On Tear, yeah.
Yeah. But as I say, people have been in and out, and even with the Tony Martin lineup, and we'd done some shows in Greece, and Bill came in South America, should I say. And Bill came on board then, and then he went. It's just odd. Everybody's been in and out umpteen times.
Did you like were you talking through some of these, just the ideas around this box set, or even with Forbidden, remixing that? Were you talking to Tony about these things as you were working on them?
Yes, we've been in touch with Tony, and I've met up with Tony a few times because Tony went off and done his own thing as well, and but it's been great when we actually sat down and been able to talk about stuff and say, well, yeah, that was a great period. And unfortunately, Tony got the brunt of it. It's because he was sort of left out, really. And It's a great time now to be able to bring him into the light and let people see what sort of singer he is. I mean, he's got a great voice, and he comes up with some great ideas. And he didn't want to follow in Ozzy's footsteps or Ronnie's footsteps with any kind of. He wanted to change things lyrically to a different subject, which he did. I mean, he really, to be honest, I brought him into the situation. It's a really difficult thing to follow people like he did follow, to follow Ozzy, Dio, Gillan. I mean, these people have been around for years. Everybody knew them.
Yeah.
But to bring him in cold and I think I expected too much from him because I didn't quite understand that. But the pressure that was on him at that time was tremendous, and he did a great job. He really did.
Yeah, and it is really great for fans to get this reissue, to get this box set, so that the spotlight can be put on him and the rest of the band. But yeah, I'm sure for you too, right, to be able to revisit these things and bring them to light. And if in the moment you had put too much pressure on Tony Martin, well, here we are today celebrating him, right, and celebrating this era. So that's got to feel pretty good.
Absolutely, and we've talked about this, Tony and I, and it really is good now that finally, like, the pressure that was on has gone off. Well, I mean, hopefully people like the box set, but at least it's out there. And as I say, over the years, many people have said about that period, why don't we ever hear any music from that period? And because they deleted the albums, they were after a while, so you couldn't get them. And they said, will you ever release that? And of course, I didn't know at the time. I said, well, hopefully, yeah. But of course, now we have.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, as we talk about you and Tony Martin talking and reconnecting and all of that, if you'll allow me, it's amazing to me that here we are in 2024 celebrating all things Sabbath, celebrating all of these eras. And, we've talked about Cozy and Dio has popped up, and obviously not everybody is still around. To me, it's amazing that the 4 original members, though, you're still on this planet. And, I'm just curious, do you stay in touch with Bill and Geezer and Ozzy these days?
I stay in touch with Ozzy a lot, virtually every week, really. We in contact. Well, I mean, I heard from him yesterday, I heard from him the day before. So we do stay in contact. Geezer, not quite so much. I'd like to, but Geezer's always been a little bit quiet and a bit of a recluse and likes to do his own thing. But when we do stay in touch, it's probably by email. The last time I saw him was in Birmingham when we did, I don't know if you know about the Black Sabbath ballet that is out. Well, Geezer came to the opening.
Awesome.
And, so it was great to see him, and he looked really well, and he's happy. So it was good. Bill, I haven't seen Bill for a while now, since we've done the awards, I think. I don't know if it was since the Grammy or whatever, but it's been a while since I've seen Bill. I do hear from him. It was his birthday the other week, so I did send him a message and he got back. But it's not, we don't talk on a regular basis, but everybody's still part of it, if you know what I mean. It's still like, you have this brotherhood, but you know your friends, but you don't have to keep staying in touch. When we do see each other, it's like nothing's happened.
I mean, that's exactly, what you said, brotherhood. That's what it is. You pick up right where you left off, even if it's been years or even if things have happened in between. That's absolutely, I think, the sign of that true friendship, that true brotherhood. Talking about you and Ozzy staying in touch pretty regularly. It's been exciting to hear Ozzy's voice fresh on the radio with his song "Crack Cocaine" with Billy Morrison. Do you and Ozzy, do you think you guys would ever collaborate on a song like that? Not a Black Sabbath song, not an Ozzy song, but maybe like an Iommi song or something like that?
Well, we did on his last album. We've done 2 tracks together. He asked about if I got anything, and I sent some stuff over, and he liked it. We went ahead with it. So, yeah, we've done that. And but who knows? There's nothing. I don't turn it. I look at everything nowadays. I don't say, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that." I have to think it over, and anything that comes now in the future, I always give it a thought, whatever it may be, really.
Well, I love hearing that, and I got to say, "Degradation Rules" from Patient Number 9 from Ozzy's album. That was I think that was my favorite track on that, and not just because you were on it, but the fact that you were on it. I think it's such a killer song, and that one always stood out to me when I listened through that album.
No, great, thank you. Yeah, and we got a Grammy for that as well, which was great.
Yeah, not a bad thing, man. Well, hey, last question, Tony, and I can't thank you enough for the time and just talking through all this. But for me, like I mentioned at the very very start of this, you're the reason why I have an SG sitting behind me, and why I do my best to pretend like I can play the guitar and all of that. And so as I still go back and listen through Sabbath and even hear new songs or songs that I haven't really spent much time with, like some of these Tony Martin songs, I'm just always drawn to the riffs, man, and the way that you drive the band through your guitar. And so, it's a personal question for me. It's a question I'm sure you've thought about or answered, and even probably the answer has changed many times. But not asking about your favorite song or anything like that, but the riff that you wrote, that when you wrote it, you just knew it was special. And to this day, even years later, decades later, it's something that you can think back on. Like, yep, that riff, man, that was one of those riffs that was just special. That was just perfect when I came up with it. What comes to mind when you hear that?
Well, without sounding big-headed, a few. when we first done the Black Sabbath riff, that was straight away. I knew it just had this vibe and a feeling, and it was something so different in them days that you'd never heard that sort of thing before. And I don't know how it all happened. It just sort of come out, and that was the benchmark for that album. Once we'd done Wicked World, Black Sabbath, then the rest of them flowed along. And the same with Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and also Into the Void. I mean, that was a riff that I really liked, and it's a lot of. I mean, that was Eddie Van Halen's favourite, to be honest. Into the Void. He'd always say, "Oh, can you play Into the Void?" And so it was great to hear that. And so there's a few that sort of, for me, Iron Man and Warp. Oh, there's a lot that really meant something. Well, they've all meant something, but they're the ones that sort of stood out initially.
Yeah. No, and I get that, man. It all goes back to the Devil's Interval, right, with Black Sabbath.
Yes, it does, which opened a complete can of worms for us, of course. You name it, they come to the show, and oh dear. I mean, we got so much from the church and Satanists and God knows what else in the early days. Do you have
any regrets, tied to some of those things or anything like that? As all the inclusion of religion and things like that are getting, that tritone getting named the Devil's Interval. Do you look back on that and just think like, I
mean, it certainly brought everybody's attention to it. So I think it was great. We did that. It was something very different. I didn't even realize, I didn't even think of it as anything like that. It just appealed to me when I played it, and us all, and we liked it. And then Ozzy came up with this melody line, then Geezer wrote the lyrics for it. So everything just fitted in, and it just sounded right.
Yeah.
And that was our launch, really. But of course, in them days, there was no MTV and all that sort of stuff, and no internet. You had to it was word of mouth. So you really did have to go and play at these places and build up a reputation and build either a good reputation or a bad one, whichever way it went. But you had to physically, if it had been internet in them days, who knows what would have happened.
Sure,
yeah, or MTV.
To this day, though, man, that riff, there is something special about it. So it's I love hearing that. Tony Iommi, I can't thank you enough for your time tonight, man, for hanging with us on Loudwire Nights. Have to say congrats on the release of this incredible new box set out today, Anno Domini 1989 to 1995, featuring those 4 Tony Martin era Sabbath records, all freshly reissued for Sabbath fans to dive into. Tony, I hope you're able to soak up the love and excitement surrounding this release, and I'll just say you are welcome on this show anytime, brother.
Oh, thanks, Chuck. I really appreciate it, mate. And thanks to all the fans out there. Thank you very much.
That wraps up this episode of Loudwire Nights on Demand. Stay caught up with everything happening in the world of rock and metal on the Loudwire app and at loudwire.com.